Life had a way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you'd find me tucked away in the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was mine. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves were my domain. I never sought the spotlight. Fading into the background was more my style. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine was a predictable cycle: wake up, work, and return to my tiny apartment filled with secondhand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Ethan walked into my life on a day much like any other. He was looking for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice had a warmth to it that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book?" "I'm feeling adventurous," he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sure, what genre are you interested in?" I replied, adjusting my glasses and trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. "I don't know, surprise me," he said with a grin that hinted at the fun he found in this small challenge. That was the start of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books, and I'd recommend titles, but soon those talks shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. "You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" he asked, leaning on the counter with a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, the sound unfamiliar even to me. "Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement. Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat?" he suggested. I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. "I don't know, Ethan." "Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who enjoys your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town," he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, sure, but no fancy places. I don't do well with all that pomp." "Deal," Ethan said, his smile lighting up the room. "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen, despite living there my whole life. He made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. "Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. "Ethan, He gently placed a finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see." Ethan had become the bright spot in my day, making everything seem more vibrant with his care and affection. He had this way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. His warmth won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible but desirable. When he proposed, it felt like a dream. "Marry me, Rita." "I can't imagine my life without you," he said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take: meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. "My folks, they have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home, but don't sweat it, okay? They're going to love you once they see how amazing you are," he assured me, though his words did little to ease my nerves. I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that screamed modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost disinterested, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. "You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in," he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. The day arrived, and I chose a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. "You sure they're going to like me?" I asked, seeking some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself, Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart was pounding. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The door swung open, and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions hard to read. The dinner that followed was a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual dinner conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into a role of passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of disappointment, not just in the evening's events, but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged, a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said, but his words did little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it became clear that Ethan's parents weren't my biggest fans. They seemed to view me as some sort of gold digger, which couldn't have been further from the truth. I never cared about Ethan's money. I barely even knew about it until he brought it up himself one evening, casually mentioning, "My parents are a bit old school, you know. They worry about the weirdest things like money and status." One night, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach knotting with anxiety. "It's my parents," he started, finally meeting my gaze. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." "A prenup?" The word felt foreign and bitter on my tongue. "Ethan, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or whatever." I was hurt, not going to lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some stupid agreement. "Fine," I said more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, whatever. I don't care. I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved into Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which I soon found out meant surprise visits that were more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss started to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't overnight, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly, eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She dropped by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his," she would say pointedly. "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things." "I love him," I'd reply, trying to keep my cool. She'd scoff. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with, nothing." One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knick-knack that belonged to Ethan. "See this couch? Ethan's. That painting? Also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house. They wouldn't just visit, they'd demand coffee the moment they walked in, critique how I made it, too weak, too strong, then sit in front of the TV, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it, George would say, not even bothering to look at me. The worst part? Ethan never said a word against it. He'd laugh along, adding his own jabs. Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time. I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this? I confront Ethan after his parents left. Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are. He'd shrug it off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right? That line hit me like a slap in the face. So that was it. I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them, just another reason to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work, shelving books, when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. This wasn't just stress. It was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but wonder. Alone in my hospital room, the pain was relentless, and Ethan had yet to send a single message or make a call. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a knock on the door interrupted the monotony. The visitor was someone I hadn't expected. A man in a suit, holding a briefcase, looking entirely out of place in the sterile environment of the hospital room. Yeah, that's me. Who are you? My voice was weak, a result of both physical pain and the endless cycle of disappointment. I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you, he said, his tone formal but with a glimmer of something in his eyes that piqued my curiosity. Despite my condition, I gestured for him to continue. It's about your great-uncle, Edward Turner. He recently passed away, and you're his sole heir. He left you an inheritance, Michael explained. The words took a moment to register. Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him in 15 years, I asked, still in disbelief. Michael nodded reassuringly. Yes, I'm quite sure. He was a private man but always remembered you. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Lying in my hospital bed, I felt a mix of confusion and anticipation as Michael prepared to explain the details of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents. Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite an inheritance. We're not just talking about cash. There's $20 million, to be exact, Michael said, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. I blinked, struggling to grasp the enormity of it. $20 million? I echoed, my voice cracking with disbelief. That's right, Michael confirmed. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These are significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms. My mind raced to comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. Owning parts of major companies felt like a fantasy. And there's the property, Michael continued, flipping through the papers. An old large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house. It's a mansion with history and acres of land. It's all yours. I tried to picture the mansion, a place I'd only seen in movies, and felt overwhelmed. Don't forget about the antique car, Michael added with a slight smile. A classic, fully restored and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, finding the situation surreal. An antique car, too. What am I going to do with that? I barely drive. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then. He continued to detail the furniture and paintings inside the mansion, all genuine antiques, some centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room seemed to close in on me as I processed the information. So I had inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture. It was all beyond belief. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a swirl of gratitude, disbelief, and responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, Eve assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with Ethan's name flashing on the screen. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens next? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Rita. And change it did. After the unexpected windfall, Ethan and his family seemed to turn a new leaf. Their hospital visits, once infrequent, now felt like scenes from a melodrama. Ethan, who had barely checked on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned frown. "How are you feeling today, love?" he asked, his voice laced with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Linda, was even more theatrical. "Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get home." "Just you wait," she said, her smile wide but not quite genuine. It was all too sudden, too much. Despite my suspicions, I played along, smiling weakly and thanking them for their care. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. So one day, I mustered the strength to follow them after their routine visit. My heart raced as I hid behind a corner and listened to their true selves unravel. Their laughter was harsh and jarring. "Can you believe how easy it is? She's so naive. She's eating right out of our hands," Ethan said, chuckling. Linda's voice was sharp and calculated. "Make sure she has a baby with you, Ethan. Once she does, she won't ever be able to leave us. Then we'll have a real hold on her and her fortune." Their cruel, cold words didn't shock me, though they were deeply disappointing. I was done pretending. Silently, I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a resolve within me. They saw me as nothing more than a means to their end, but I would no longer play their game. Once I was discharged and back at the house, it felt like walking into a stranger's home. Ethan and his parents were there, their faces painted with false concern and eagerness. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Ethan was the first to break the silence, his voice a mix of feigned sweetness and underlying greed. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you." Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze squarely. "I'm feeling better, thanks, but we need to talk, all of us." Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped together. "Of course, dear. We're here for you, whatever you need." Taking a deep breath, I laid my cards on the table. "I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. And before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell into a stunned silence. Ethan's face drained of color as his mask slipped, revealing his panic. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy," he stammered, struggling for words. "Happy?" The word tasted bitter. "You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now suddenly, you're worried about me because I'm worth something to you." Linda jumped in, her tone a mix of anger and guilt tripping. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag and waved it in front of them. "This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for." George, silent until now, spoke with a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here." Moving into my own place was a breath of fresh air. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new living space, it was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone calls started almost immediately. Ethan, with desperation in his voice, was the first. "Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out. I know we can." His pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. "Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that." Soon, Linda chimed in, her tone toxic with anger and guilt tripping. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, you owe us. Rita, you're making a huge mistake." "Owe you for what, Linda?" "For making me feel like nothing more than a burden? No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye." Hanging up felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final severance from a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very document they had insisted on was now the source of their family's strife. With my great uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found new purpose and generosity. I donated a significant portion to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a real difference. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, filled with challenges and heartache, but standing in my bookstore surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness.